I was doing some research
This meeting is being recorded.
and I came across this article about the Lost Colony, because it's in North Carolina, being connected to my home state of Georgia. And that's where the information about the Dare Stones, that's where I discovered that, and the whole connection to the 1940s. So we can talk about that when you're ready. But
Okay.
that's where, my that whole mystery of the colony and not knowing, and the idea of this 19-year-old girl and her baby and what happened to them, that really intrigued me.
So I think that answers Nancy Fish's question about how she wanted to know, as she read the book, how much you knew about your story and its characters before you started writing. So you knew all that before you started writing, right?
I knew that much, and then I read a lot. There's not a whole lot to be found about Eleanor in particular, aside from where she was born and married. And then there's a little about John White that we can find, but some of it is sketchy too. We're really not sure about a lot of that history. It's just been lost. We do
So
have
flash forward from 1857 to the 1900s, when you made reference to the Dare Stones. So talk about them, and then we'll talk about the setting of the book, because the Dare Stones and Roanoke are all part of history that I think intrigued you.
And this is the true history. So in 1937, this fella's on vacation with his wife in North Carolina. They've come from California, and they're in a car and they're driving near the coast, and they're in a little town called Edenton, North Carolina. It's about 50 miles inland from where the Roanoke colony disappeared. And he gets out on the highway and he stops the car, and he says he was looking for chestnuts. I think that was funny, because we all know what men are doing on the side of the road on vacation in 1937. But he trips over a big rock, and it's got an inscription on it that he can't read. But it's the end of the Depression, 1937, and people are looking for any way to make a buck. And he looked at this thing and thought, well, maybe somebody will pay me for it. So he tossed it in his trunk. And they went on their way, and they conveniently come down into Atlanta, and they drop in by Emory College, and he takes this thing in and plops it down and says, so what do you make of this? What do you give me for it? And all of the experts that looked at this stone over the next few years really lost their minds. They thought they had solved the oldest American mystery, because the inscription, when it was read, they believed was Elizabethan English. And it was a message from Eleanor White Dare, John White's daughter, the governor of the colony. And it said there had been a massacre, and that all of the colonists that were still surviving at that time had been wiped out, save about 7 of them. Her daughter and her husband also had died. And the back side of the stone is like a headstone. It has their names and the date, 1591. And then the other side is that message, and it's to her father. And basically it's saying, this is what happened, and we're going this way. Come and find me. Anybody who finds this stone, give it to my dad. And over the next few years, Emory College, they never could decide if this stone was real or not. It referenced a second one that was a headstone that was supposed to be nearby with all of the other colonist names on it. So they went and searched for that, couldn't find it. Conveniently, one of the professors at Emory, his dad was the president at Brenau University, which was it was Brenau College at the time. It's a women's college in Gainesville, Georgia, about an hour north of where I grew up, about an hour from where I live now. So I couldn't believe I didn't know any of this. I'd never heard anything about it. They took that stone to Brenau, and they continued the search. And then they did something that tripped everything up. They put out a call, and they said, anybody else who finds one of these, we'll pay you for them. And so once they did that, you know what happened? They came out of the woodwork. Everybody's daddy had one they found in the creek or in the barn or whatever. So this guy ends up being like 48 stones. And it has a whole story about what happened to Eleanor. Where did Eleanor go? And it brings her down into North Georgia, where she lives with a group of Native Americans She had traveled on a trading trail with friendly Native Americans, and she marries a Native American king and has a child by this man. And then the tribe kicks her out because apparently they're upset that she's had a child with their king. And they come on down the river. Literally, they sent Eleanor down the river. She comes on down into Fulton County, just about 10 minutes from where I live now. Isn't that incredible? In a cave, apparently, she dies. She has her daughter, and one of the last survivors carved one of the last stones. And then we don't know what happens to the rest of them.
But the authenticity of all of these stones is highly questionable.
Very questionable, because the Saturday Evening Post sends a reporter, because it's a big deal. It was like a huge thing in the news all over the world. And they debunked the whole thing. Saturday Evening Post said, this is a bunch of hooey. This moonshiner from the sticks has made all of this up, and you guys have pulled a big one on us. So the thing that intrigues me is that first stone that was found looks very different from the others. And it has never been authenticated, but it has also never been proved to be a fraud like some of the others. So we still don't know. You can go and see it at Brenau University. They have it in a little archive room. And I went in and saw it. It gives you chills. It makes your hair stand up. I looked at it and I thought, I didn't care. I just didn't care if it was real. If she had carved it, or somebody had carved it for her, or somebody in 1930 had carved it, it didn't matter to me, because I was remembering her. And that, I think, it made it part of her story. And I think that's all she would have wanted, was to be remembered.
In fact, you said in another interview that you actually were surprised how emotional you got when you saw it.
I was so emotional. I was so embarrassed. This little archive room is, nobody goes to see this thing, I don't think. They don't advertise it. It's kind of an embarrassment to the college, because they don't know what they have on their hands. They can't throw it away, but neither do they want to say, oh, look what we've got here. So her story has been lost more than once in that way. She's been inconvenient to several different people over her lifetime and our existence. And so I stood there and I looked at it, and the poor woman that was standing there with me, I started to cry. And I thought, she's going to think I'm nuts. And I didn't know why. I was crying. And I drove home, and I got about halfway home before I realized I wasn't sad. I was really angry, because her story's been lost. And I just wanted to do something about that, so we would remember her.
And so, had you decided that you wanted to write the book before you saw the stone, or did that moment of emotion that overcame you when you saw the original stone inspire you to write the book? Which came first?
I think it was a combination, because I was curious. I had the why I need to see this thing when I went to see it, but I didn't know what I would have to add to the story. And I wrestled with it when I came back from seeing it. I tried writing from Eleanor's point of view, and it was terrible. It was awful. I couldn't connect to just this dry, I don't know. I was trying to make up what might have happened to her, and somehow it felt like I was doing the same thing over again that those stones had done. And I didn't like it. I tossed it several times. And then I realized, what I know is 1591 is when this stone, the first one, is carved. And, 1587, when the colony disappears. I know that. I know when this stone is found again in 1937. But where was it in between all that time? And who would it have mattered to? And I realized it would matter to her daughter, and it would matter to her daughter and the daughter that came after that. So at that point, I thought, what if I have a woman at the end of World War II, right after the whole thing has been debunked? So say it's your family story, and somebody says, sorry, that's not true. What do you do with that? Who does that make you then? And 1942 is when the stones were debunked. And I said it in 1945 with this woman and her daughter who are sort of in the same situation that Eleanor would have been in, sort of at the edge of the world. They don't know what's going to happen to them after the war ends. She's a widow, and the world is changing for women at that point. It was a jumping off point, but you kind of don't know that when you're standing there on that ledge. And I thought a lot about that and what it means when you're on a ledge like that with your little girl looking at you. What do you turn to? You look at the people who came before you. You look at your mother, you look at your grandmother. You want to know how they did it. How did you get through? What did you do? Who are we? And so those were the questions I was asking.
So that gets to the story.
Yep.
So the story really takes place in 1945. It's almost the end of World War II. And a woman and her daughter actually end up returning to the old estate of their family just outside of Savannah. So this is a very local story. And we also know why he loved local Southern history.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to select that? You described what's inspired you to select that time, but what inspired you to select that place for the setting?
So I was very particular about this. I tried writing it in North Georgia because of how the story on the Dare Stones depicted her living in that valley in North Georgia. And it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel real to me. That whole story on those stones is kind of true to its time. The tone felt so wrong to me. Like, she married a Native American king and had a child. It felt like an episode of The Lone Ranger, like a story a man would have made up. It didn't feel true to me. So when I went back to kind of research the history that would be in this family, these 15 generations of women from Eleanor up to 1945, it was tricky. I had to really dig. Women's history is not recorded in the same way. And so I was looking at things like cookbooks, and I was looking at art and quilts and family Bibles and gardening. And as I was doing that, I was looking at how women moved through, and when I really should say were moved through the early, just the origins of the founding of our country and the colonies, and then how they would have moved into the area that would be Savannah. So that's what brought me there. And then I have this weird thing I do where I associate colors with people, and I do it with places too. And the colors, when I was riding in North Georgia, didn't feel right to me. And we took a family trip to Savannah. I love going there. I love standing there and knowing that I'm standing there in that pre-revolutionary history. I love that. It's like being in the origin story of our whole country. And I looked around and I looked at my husband and I said, it's the right color here. This is the color that this book's supposed to be. It's very blue and purple in my brain, and it feels that way when I'm in Savannah. And so that was part of my thinking creatively when I chose that. I like it because I love a marsh. A marsh is a place of origin to me. Things grow out of that, and then there are secrets in it. It's not obvious when you're looking at a marsh what you're looking at. And there are so many reasons for why I chose Savannah, but that's really it. And then the idea of this home of Evertell is kind of how I see the South in whole. I feel like the South, I have a love-hate relationship with the history in the South, mostly love. But it is a big haunted house, you know? There are a lot of things in it. The stories that we tell, the stories that we don't tell, all our ghosts, all our memories. And there's usually a big table, and you kind of have to figure out how you're going to sit at it and who you're going to sit at it with and how you're going to stand it to sit there with them. It's a complicated family, and that's what I thought this Evertell was.
Wow. So we have a comment from Ronnie Leibowitz that Kimberly, I don't want to put you on the spot, but she says, are you aware that there's a History Channel show that highlights two stonemasons who were hired to investigate the original stone with the cooperation of the college? And that show also highlighted the ongoing archaeology to trace what happened at the colony. Are you aware of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And would you recommend that show? Do you know what it's called?
I can't remember. There was one called Writ on Rock at one point. I've watched several of them, and most of them are, just a hair kooky. And then there's good, and there's good to it too. It's really intriguing, and I love a myth, and I love a legend, and I love if somebody wants to lean in and say it might have been aliens, I like a story. It's fun, but nobody knows. It's still totally a mystery. And I think, my practical brain thinks somebody probably was exploiting the whole history of it, because it was the 350th anniversary, the year that they found it. They had just started the play in North Carolina, the Paul Green play.
Right.
The same guy that turned up with the original stone disappeared, just in poof, into smoke. Nobody was ever able to find him again after he left Emory. There were rumors that he was trying to, with a movie camera, trying to record the play, that he was trying to, and John Green's the first night, the opening night, and they threw him out. There was also rumors that he had tried to sell this rock other places. So, there's a lot of sketchiness to the whole thing. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff that went on with the later stones, and the guy, gosh, I'm going blank on his name right now, but he had a pork pie hat, and he was definitely a moonshiner and a scam artist. He was selling Native American fake effigy, all kinds of sketchiness. So I do think they were in cahoots, and they probably created the majority of those stones. The first one just intrigues me.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple questions people always want to know. So first of all, how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, I learned about the Dare Stones when my kids were in pull-ups. They are now, one is a college graduate and the other is about to graduate college. So I've known about it a long time. Figuring out how to write it, because, I had the false starts with Eleanor, and then I wrote the whole manuscript in 1945 with Allison Penn and turned it in. And my agent said, "This is lovely." And that took me 2 years. And then she said, "Where's the rest?" And I said, "What do you mean, where's the rest? It's huge. I've given you all these generations. What more do you want?" And she said, "Where's Eleanor's story?" And I said, "I'm not going to do that. I already tried. It was awful. And I feel like I'm stomping through a graveyard, like stomping over graves. Just, it's not any of my business. I don't know what happened to her, and I shouldn't make it up." And she said, "You're such a chicken. Why were you crying over that stone? If you're not going to tell her story, what's the point?" And she also said, "I know you know it. I know you know it all. I can tell when I read this, and you've not written it." And she was right. I did. I had already written all of their names. I made up all their names. I knew where they'd all gone. I knew what had happened to her, but I was being a chicken. And I was in bed. It's about 2 a.m. And I woke up and I could hear this thing. And I sat up in my bed, and my husband said, "What is it?" And I said, "It's a mother." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Just go back to sleep." And I got I have a notepad on the side of the bed, and I started writing. And it wasn't that typical side by side, 2-timeline historical fiction. It was a fable, and it was a story that had been passed down mother to daughter through those 15 generations. So maybe true, maybe not, because your mama doesn't tell you the truth when you ask her about your family. She tells you little pieces of what you need to know, and maybe when you need to know them. And sometimes you run out of time before you know all of it. Sometimes you never know. what do you do with that, with all the questions that you have? And so Eleanor's Tale, I wrote, I'm telling you, maybe 6 weeks. It came fast, and turned that in. So total, I would say 6 years.
6 years. Wow. And I have to say, Kimberly, for those people who aren't writers, that seems like an awesome commitment and dedication.
Craziness is what it is.
Intuitiveness. I mean, good for you that you have the grit. So what's your writing process? Do you write in the morning? Do you write every day for a couple hours? What's your process?
I do. I write 24/7. I think it's not all at the desk. You know, I'm always thinking about it. And I have, there's a kind of an ebb and a flow to it. Lots of research for a while where I'm just kind of weeding through things. I'm sort of charmed by something just strikes me, and I like it, and so I learn everything I can about it, and I make little notes and piles of things and save pictures, and you know, it becomes kind of like a jewel box of just things that I love. And then you begin in that, during that process, to kind of find a story that's entertaining my brain and explaining my love for whatever it is, with in particular this history. I was doing that for a long time before I found the story. And then I'll start to write. I'll hear a voice. I'm usually my work is very character driven. It's not plot driven. I have to figure out a plot at some point because I have people and I don't know what I want them to do. And I'll write slowly and like starts and fits for a while like that. And then at some point I have a story and I sort of get obsessed and I write a draft really fast. But I can't get to that, like I can't make that happen. It's that's the most aggravating part of it. Sometimes you're stuck in that for a long time. And then I really like to revise. So my favorite part is once I have a draft, and then I work on it and work on it and turn it over and turn it over and turn it over again until I love it.
Well, you're a masterful storyteller, and it's a real gift to be able to tell a story that's so engaging. And I hope everybody will think about picking up this lost book of Eleanor Dare. And I want to thank Kimberly Brock for joining us today. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. I love Hilton Head. I cannot wait to get back down there. I was supposed to be in South Carolina, Savannah, a few months ago, and I got sick and had to cancel, and I'm so heartbroken. We miss it so badly. That's where we love to go. So thank you for having me.
Well, Kimberly, we'll have you come down when you feature you in person when we have your next book coming out, okay?
Thank you. I would love it.
We would love to do that. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Janet. Great job. Thank you, Kimberly. So nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Great interview. Love your passion for writing. Love your passion for history. You did a great job.
I hope everyone really enjoys it. I tell people, I think they pick it up because they think it's an answer, and I want it to be a book of questions.
Oh, it's a wonderful book, and it was a wonderful interview. Again, it's The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare. Here you go. So ladies, I hope you enjoyed this edition of our author series. Just a couple of things we wanted to remind you of. The next one will be on January the 11th. And our author is Sandra Dallas, and the book is Little Souls, January 11th. So go ahead and put that on your calendars. And the book is Little Souls. Just a couple of things coming up. We have the wonderful Lantern Parade this Saturday night, basically starting at 5:30. We do have a Wahi contingent of women that will be in the parade. Thank you, Tamara, for what you've done to help inspire us to get involved with that. That's on the 12th. And then we have the veterans event. Please, if you are not a veteran, that is fine. But if you care about veterans and sacrifices they have made for our country, please come again. It's just going to be a short program. It's going to be USCB, Hilton Head. And we're going to celebrate and honor our veterans. You all that are veterans, your spouses, your siblings, your friends that are veterans on the 18th at USCB Hilton Head. You can still sign up until Monday. And then don't forget the Gift of Joy on December the 8th. And we're very excited. Lots of wonderful performances. And also we have our toy drive for the Children's Center. And I want to thank Nancy Fish. Again, I want to thank Janet, Bobby Helbig. If you have any suggestions for authors, please let Bobby Helbig know. And in closing, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. We have so much to be thankful for. We have so many wonderful friends, and we have a wonderful place to live. And our family members can be very special to us, but most of all, our Wahi friends. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on January the 11th. Goodbye, everybody.